Well, hey, it's been about 4 or 5 months since my last video, and I kind of left things on a bit of a cliffhanger. So I'm glad to be back with news to report and a story to tell. So just to recap, I made that video when I had quit a ceremony, Jones, for the very first time, right in the middle. I just kind of lost heart at the end of the stereo myth, the rock part of my fundamentic rite, and gave up and went inside and called it a night. And it was really disconcerting. I'd had some really vivid visionary experiences. I had asked to see what it was that was resisting me so strongly, pushing back so hard to keep me away from the kind of states that state of belief space. That's the point of doing these things. And I had seen an Olmec head that had turned into a gorilla, a cartoon gorilla in a business suit that came muscling in on me. And I saw this horrific close-up of a sort of a bat crossed with a bear snarling at me with pure malice. And I had sort of given to understand that I was up against something, some kind of entity, demonic, probably, and I needed to do something about it. And so what I was thinking, based on a conversation that I had with a friend, was that maybe by doing the same ceremony so many times, dozens and dozens of times, maybe it was starting to get a little stale, and I was getting diminishing returns. And so the answer would be to try something different. Still phonomancy, still using music to put myself into emotional states that I would use to sort of navigate my trance. But I decided what I was going to do was load up the first part, which was always the part where there's a lot of anxiety and fear, with just tons of aggressive music, and just try to get as fired up as I could and maybe generate some momentum that would allow me to break through that barrier. And so that's what I did. And I've got some notes here that I'm going to be checking. So this was around June 26th or 27th. And things started off all right. I don't have the exact playlist at hand, but I remember I worked through I was working through some Jane's Addiction stuff when things started to go wrong. And I was on my feet and dancing, and all of a sudden I just started to feel this weight settle on me. Like gravity was slowly being like, somebody's just turning that knob, and it was getting harder and harder to stay on my feet and dance. And at the same time, I started to get more and more nauseous. This is like a good 45 minutes into the night, And I want to emphasize again, I've done this a lot, and I kind of know the difference between some stomach upset and something really being off. Eventually, I just couldn't stand up anymore, and I had to sit down, and that was when I started to have a vision of slaves toiling, like long lines of people in loincloths with burdens on their back, trudging up a ramp, and an overseer, a slave driver with a whip, cracking it over their heads and driving them on. And the message that I was given understand was like, that's you. You're not going to do this anymore. You are going to do what you're told. And it was so cruel. And I was utterly unable to stand up against it, which was so humiliating. I've been used to, I fought my way through a lot of difficult situations just by persevering, just holding on for another moment, and another moment, and eventually whatever that negative feeling was and that discomfort would dissipate, and I'd be able to get on with things. And this time it just wasn't moving. And as I was sitting there feeling an immense despair fell on me, because I started thinking like, oh my God, maybe this is the end of this for me. Jones. Then maybe I won't be able to do phonomancy anymore. In which case, the last 3 years, everything that I've put into this, into establishing the first church of David Bowie and trying to create this idea of entertainment, this theatrical spectacle that's going to create an apprehension of the sacred in the audience. All the money that I'd spent on it, all the hours and hours and hours I'd spent on it, the book that I'd written, the book that I was planning to write, was all worthless. And I just felt like I was dying. I felt like my life was over. I tried to relax. I tried to soothe myself. I put on some much softer music. I put on Barry Manilow's "Could This Be Magic?" and I felt ill listening to it. It wasn't just that I couldn't get any of that phonomantic energy going. It's like the listening to music was actually making me even sicker. So I quit and I went inside, and I'm an hour into it, and I'm on a big dose. I'm on a 5 grams of ayahuasca dose with a big hit of pot. It was a lot of energy to be sort of carrying around, and it was a lot to be sitting there with, nothing to do. So I felt like maybe I should be around trees. I'm not much one for nature, but so many people talk about when they get great anxiety, they feel better, they feel soothed by being around nature. So it was nighttime, and I didn't necessarily feel safe going to the park by myself. So I called my friend, and he came over, and we walked to the park, and I just kind of talked about what I was feeling, and it just kept getting worse and worse and worse and worse. The depression, whatever depression I had been carrying, was just increasing exponentially to the point where I was feeling actively suicidal, and I had to go and check. I had a bottle of Percocets left over from an operation I had a few years ago. And I had to go make sure that I'd gotten rid of them, because I was afraid that after my friend left, if I was still feeling the way that I was, that I would do something stupid. And luckily, I'd gotten rid of them a ways before. And for days afterwards, I was extremely depressed, psychotically depressed. Like I thought I've been, dysthymic my whole life. I thought I knew my way around melancholy and depression, but I'd never experienced the depths of anything like this before. And for the first time, I could understand why somebody might kill themselves just to escape that feeling. And the worst part of it was, I felt betrayed by God. And, I use that term advisedly. God is just, divinity or transcendent reality, self-aware transcendent reality, or whatever you want to think. But I had put my trust in it. I had been doing this really difficult work and having these incredibly moving and incredibly profound seeming experiences. And then in my daily life, I had that still small voice in my heart that was telling me that I was doing the right things. I was making the right moves, and I should pursue this work with everything I've got. I had this vision once, I think I've described it somewhere else, of standing on the edge of a chasm, and on the far side was Metropolis, the new Atlantis, the silver and chrome spires of this city that for me represents the science fictional future, the wonderful future that I'm trying to help create. And in the chasm at the bottom of it is everything that I was afraid of, like growing old, alone and loveless, and working a menial job. And I was given to understand that there's a bridge between where I was and where I wanted to go, like a rope bridge, a slat bridge. It was invisible, but it wasn't like the invisible bridge in that Indiana Jones movie where you could take some sand and throw it and then see the bridge. The thing about this bridge is it only came into existence one slat at a time, and each slat only came into existence at the very moment where you took a step and you tipped past your balance point to where there was no going back and you were about to plunge face first into the abyss, and only at that exact split second would the slat appear and your foot would land safely. And I remember when I had this vision while I was meditating, I was appalled to think about doing that over and over hundreds of times in order to get to where I wanted to go. And I said, nobody could do that. The courage required for that would be superhuman. And the voice said, well, you want to be a superhero, don't you? And I had to admit, they had me there. If I was going to create this legion of shamanic superheroes that I've been sort of dreaming of, I'd have to take that step over and over and over again, because what was required of me was trust and belief. And so I've been doing that. I've been taking those steps. And then now I had taken one more step and the slat wasn't there. And I was falling. I was falling towards everything that I was afraid of. And my life started to seem like a nightmare. Like a nightmare I was not going to escape from. And so that kind of went on for about, I don't know, maybe 2 weeks. And gradually it got better. A little bit better at a time, a little bit better. It got better to the point where by the time August came around, early August, I was ready to give it another go. I was ready to do a ceremony proper again, because one of the things that I thought had gone wrong in that abortive attempt was it was the lack of narrative structure had left me feel a little lost. I really had come to depend on knowing, like, I need to do this then, and this now, and this now, and this now, and knowing, being guided by the story of the ceremony into the different emotional states that I was trying to get to, you know? So I screwed my cards to the sticking point, and I went in and I did it again, and this was on August 5th, I believe. And, the invocation of the Divine Mother went okay. And the processional went okay. I was on my feet, dancing and feeling good. And then my vision started to get darker. I saw this cave made of demons. Like, the walls and the stalactites and the stalagmites were all made of these demonic statues. I wasn't afraid, but it was scary, you know. And then as I kept going, I started to get this feeling, and the way I've described it is, imagine you're in a club, you're in a nightclub dancing, right? And you're having a good time, and then all of a sudden you feel a hand on the back of your head, like trying to force you to the ground. And you look around like, what the fuck? There's nobody there. So you keep dancing, and then again, you feel that hand on your head, and this time you decide to like resist it and shake it off, like, I'm not stopping. But the hand stays there, and the more you keep trying to dance, the harder it pushes, and slowly, like, you can't really dance anymore. You have to put everything you've got into standing upright and not letting it force you to the ground. And it just keeps pushing and pushing, and you keep resisting and resisting. But the thing is, you're getting tired and it's not. The tendons in your neck are starting to creak. Your back is starting to hurt. It's starting to get to be too much. And the more that you stand, the harder it pushes. And a vision came to me of like, of being in a jiu-jitsu gym on the mat, and I understood that I was grappling with something that was very much like a sparring partner, and my ultimate goal was to get so strong that I could hold this thing down with one hand and be able to do my work at the same time. But that wasn't that night. I had made a vow that I was not going to quit. No matter what, I was going to see this thing through to the end. And I didn't even get to the end of the stereo myth this time. Right around the time of the Boston song, I had to stop. Every minute that I was on my feet trying to do this work, I just kept getting more nauseous, more filled with despair, more uncomfortable. It was unbearable. And the worst part of it was that there was that sense of this cruel presence, the overseer, subjugating me. It was stronger than me, and it was forcing me to stop. And no matter how hard I struggled, no matter how much I was like, not quitting, I'm not. Eventually, it just got to be too much, and I had to. I gave in. I was beaten. I got beat. And so I gathered up my things, and I left the garage, and I went back into my apartment, and I went into my room, and I sat and just tried to like collect my wits. I had told my friend that maybe that I was going to be doing this again and I might need him. So I knew he was on standby, but I was, I had my pride. I didn't want to have to call him again. And I was sitting there and I got this vision of a tremendous like apartment building, like this awful, hideous, Stalin-esque apartment building. And it had this sort of thunderous presence, this impossibly loud no, just a complete authoritarian no. And then that morphed into this sort of like an Old Testament God figure, in like a white robe and a white beard, but also like Zeus, like hurling thunderbolts and commanding me, you are going to stop this. You're not doing this anymore. And it sucked. And I realized that I did not want to sit there for another 2 hours and just have this thing like echoing in my head. I needed something to distract me. And if I couldn't listen to music, then I needed somebody to talk to. So I called my friend and he came over and we just sat there and talked about nothing. And I just tried to not think about how miserable I was in that moment. When it was over, I was actively afraid of mushrooms, and I was virtually certain that I would never, ever, ever do this again. And I was also scared that maybe I had done some damage to myself. One result of that disaster video that I made was somebody wrote to me, and I'm sure with the best of intentions, but was really like adamant that I had traumatized myself. And by doing my practices the way that I had, and that the only hope for me was to, go down to the jungle in Peru and sit, in a maloca for a few months and let an ayahuasquero try to heal me. And that didn't ring right to me. But after this experience, I thought maybe there might be something to it, especially because I was having a lot of, there was this recurring visual motif of vermin in my visionary space, mice and cockroaches and ants and spiders, like sort of superimposed on what I would normally expect to see. And I thought maybe it was possible that maybe I had picked up the spiritual equivalent or psychic equivalent of a virus, or a parasite. Yeah. So in contrast to the previous time, the next day I wasn't depressed though, nor the day after, nor the day after that. I thought I got off scot-free. And that's when the anxiety attacks started. And they were brutal. I'd never experienced anything like it in my life. I thought I knew what anxiety was, but I had no idea. I probably already said something like that already, but these were full-on panic attacks. And one morning as I was sitting there at my computer trying to do my job and really just like white-knuckling it and realizing like, this just feels like it's getting worse and worse. And if it goes too much further, I don't know what I'm going to do because I feel like I could jump out of my skin right now. You just get to the point where it becomes too awful to bear and you'll do anything to get away from it, And then I realized, this is exactly what the worst parts of these last few ceremonies have felt like. This is a bad trip, except that I am stone sober, But that sense of the ground giving way beneath your feet and just an abyss of madness opening up below you that you could fall into, and the sense that this could keep getting worse and worse and worse and worse, and there might not be any escape from it at all. Even death becomes this hellish, terrifying experience. And this was my first real experience of mental illness, and I'll forever have much more compassion for people who are dealing with this stuff, who don't have the tools, because that was the thing. I have developed through hard work and multiple bad experiences. I had the tools to get myself through this. I just sat there and self-talked. hey, you're okay. Right now, in this moment, sitting in this chair, you are safe. And yes, you're worried about work, and yes, you're worried about money, and yes, you're worried about wasting your life, but none of those things matter right now. I know that they seem like the most important focal points of reality, but they're not. All that matters is right here, right now, you're warm, you're safe, you've got enough to eat, you've got a job, it's all gonna be okay. It's all gonna be okay. Just like that, you know, and just from moment to moment, you just keep talking your way through it. So that went on for, I don't know, a couple weeks, you know? And then I started looking for something to sort of help me manage it. And one thing that had happened was I had been talking to my friend Sal, and she recommended The Secret. I know. I've always sneered at that stuff too. I mean, I've read like Napoleon Hill and stuff like that. I was familiar with the idea of the New Thought, and lacking anything better to do one evening, I put that movie on and watched it. And I found all the woo-woo stuff kind of ridiculous, but I did really like the idea of constantly being aware of, well, no. So I'd watched that and it hadn't been entirely turned off. So I did some YouTube researching, and I found Abraham Hicks, who is it's this entity channeled by this woman named Esther Hicks. And there's hundreds and hundreds of hours of her lectures on YouTube. And it's pretty simple stuff, you know. But what it really comes down to is taking responsibility for how you feel, and not giving in to despair or anxiety, but making an active effort to counter that and try to feel good. You know, no matter where you are, it's like it's your responsibility to feel good. And that made a lot of sense to me, you know. Unfortunately, they don't go too far into like, how do you do that? You're just supposed to like think of something else, think of what you want or where you want to be. But of course, the problem is if you think of what you want and you're in the wrong state of mind, apparently you drive it further away from yourself. It was too much to keep track of. So what I ended up doing was basically just using affirmations, but that kept them really simple. And I started with, you are loved, you are loved, you are loved, you are loved, you are loved. And I kept saying that over and over again. And as I said it, I was really concentrating on the resonance of my sternum. You know, I've been working a lot on my singing the last few years, and the proprioception I've developed from all the strength and conditioning training that I've done has really helped a lot with that. And so as I'm speaking, I can concentrate on feeling the vibration down here. And it really felt like it was massaging my vagus nerve, which is, you know, supposed to be connected to anxiety. But more importantly, I was speaking to myself, you know. And especially when I switched from you are loved to, or rather to we love you, I started feeling like I was actually kind of channeling my higher self a little bit. I was distancing myself from my pain and my fear, and soothing myself, you know, as a parent to a child. And it occurred to me that this kind of was in line with some of that Abraham Hicks stuff too, where basically it's all about getting in alignment with source, you know, the source of your being, your higher self. And one of the metaphors that's come up in the visionary work that I've done is this idea of God being this sort of like omnipresent signal that we can tune into, sort of like antennas. It's not a perfect analogy, but it works. It works okay, you know. And the way that you can tell, like according to Abraham Hicks, the way that you can tell that you're in alignment with your source is you feel good. When what you want for yourself and what it wants for you are in alignment, you feel hopeful and you feel joy and you feel glad to be alive. And so that's what you strive for, you know, is to try to create that state in yourself. And so I really started working on that. And the more that I did it, the more it alleviated my anxiety, until gradually I think I basically established a new baseline. a new homeostatic state of just generally feeling good. I would make a point. I would wake up in the morning, and the first thing I would do before I even put my feet on the floor was think like, I am so glad to be here right now. And I'd put my feet down on the wood floor, and I would think like, it's so good to feel a solid floor beneath my feet. And I'd get up and, make some coffee and be like, God damn, I love this coffee. And it's a matter of discipline and effort, and it completely works. Not to say that like I never get anxious anymore or never get depressed, but I'm constantly mindful of it. And when it comes in, then I know how to act. And sometimes it's easier than others, And this is an idea that I'll talk about some other time, this sort of inchoate idea of a shamanic psychology, which is basically that a lot of what we accept as, mental health problems being caused by chemical imbalances in the brain and stuff like that. I mean, those things may be there, but that might not be the specific cause. The specific cause might be parasitic entities in the psychic ocean that surrounds us, attaching themselves to us and feeding, and sometimes those attacks come in and they're stronger than others. Sometimes it's just all out war, and you've got to dig in and just fight for your life. That's your job for that day. Sometimes it's the anxiety. I describe the anxiety as being sort of like, you're going about your business and you hear your doorbell ring and you go to the door and there's Hulk Hogan. And he's like, "You ready to wrestle, brother?" And you're like, "Fuck, Hulk, no, I don't want to wrestle today." He's like, "Too bad." And he comes on in, and now you're wrestling Hulk Hogan, and you got to deal with it. You got to put him away. And some days it's not that hard, and you send him on his way. And other days he comes in, he's got this look in his eye like he really wants to kill you. And then it's an all-out battle, because you can't let it take you down. You just can't. That's what it wants. What resistance wants, what the devil wants, to mythologize the term, is to take you off the board. It's designed to pull you out of this life, and the way that it's going to do it, once it gets its hooks into you, is by driving you to despair. Depression is I think, an incurable disease that's sometimes terminal, but that doesn't mean it can't be treated. It's kind of like cancer. You get treatment for cancer, and if you're lucky, it goes into remission. And if you're really lucky, the last traces of it are removed, and it never comes back. But sometimes it does, no matter how hard you try, and you just have to be vigilant and ready to cope with it again. And you keep putting up the good fight, and no matter what, you do not give up. You do not let despair take you over and take you off the board. So all that has led to where I am now, feeling stronger. And a week ago, on a sunny, warm Sunday afternoon, I decided to give it one more go. Not a full ceremony. I just wanted to see if I could work with mushrooms at all. And I was going to try to do it the way everybody else does it, taking it outside and in nature. So I took 3 grams, which by my standards is that's literally like a third of what I've done or less. Especially considering I didn't use any of the Syrian rue with it. So I took 3 grams and I went for a walk, and I walked around with my headphones on, and I sang to myself, and not a lot was happening, frankly. Wasn't seeing much. I was feeling a little like revved up, but wasn't tripping particularly hard. And then about an hour in, the depression started settling back on me again. My fear of the future, my fear of having squandered these last few years, my deeper fear that there's just something inherently wrong with me that makes it impossible for me to connect and attach to people. And I started kind of dwelling on that and thinking about it. And I'd come in for a bit, and I'd gone back out, and I was walking down the street. And then at a certain point, I was like, you know what? Why don't you at least try to talk yourself out of this? Why don't you at least try to do one of your self-talk exercises to see if you can't break the hold of this. And so I started in. We love you. 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 Speaking as my higher self, and then also speaking as my spirit clan. You know, I've got this image that is really helpful of imagining that I have a group of friends on the other side that are gathered around me, and they're kind of like my, you know, I'm inserted into this game space and they're my support team. They're kind of like my NASCAR, you know, team, like changing tires and doing all that stuff. But they're right there with me, and they were telling me, we're right there. You're never alone. We've got you. You are going to be okay. This is going to work out. And I started walking back to my house, and by the time I got here, I was feeling good enough that I decided to try it. I hit a pot, see if I couldn't goose things into opening up a bit. What I really wanted to do was the Anne Frank working from my phonomantic right, from the shamanic cabaret. You know, it's singing these 4 Neutral Milk Hotel songs, and then a Pearl Jam song, and this song by Yob called Beauty of Falling Leaves. So I hit the pot, and then I went out walking again, and I got about 800 feet, and then I started to feel like maybe I should turn around. And as I started walking back towards my house, everything just sort of like jumped, and there was this almost like a silent thunderclap. And the street that I was on, less than 1/8 of a mile from my house, where I've walked hundreds, if not thousands of times over the last year, I had no idea where it was. It was utterly alien to me. And then it gradually, like, reality came back in, and I was like, oh, right, I'm right home. I'm right near my house. I recognize this. And then I started walking again, and bam, it was like the same thing happened. And, you know, I'm used to being, I can maintain my point of focus. I don't get confused in myself. I always know right who I am and what I'm about, even if sometimes my perceptions are a little distorted. And I got a little giddy because I was like, oh shit, this is coming on hard. This just woke up. Because I was, you know, in these last few abortive ceremonies, the mushrooms never opened up at all. And all of a sudden I realized, like, oh, this is like that old freight train feeling. It's coming on. And I also realized that I had never been in public in the daytime in this state before, and I didn't necessarily want to be. You know, I was going to be vulnerable, and I needed to get to a secure place. So I walked home, and I went into the garage, and then I sang those songs with everything that I had, and I got into belief space. It wasn't particularly visual. The mushrooms that I had, they're almost 2 years old now, and they may have, and I've been working with the same batch for, you know, all this time. So they've lost a little bit of their visual potency, especially without the boost of the Syrian rue. And so I didn't see all that much, but I felt it all. You know, I felt the relief of entering into belief space. And that was a good feeling. That was amazing. Because I really had been afraid that this stuff was lost to me forever, that I had somehow, some kind of biochemical switch had been thrown, and I was never going to be able to access these states again. That I was going to be like poor Terence McKenna and be like frightened away and never be able to get back there. You know, that glorious place where God is a given. You know, the goddess is real. And that my life that I'm on this incredible adventure. And you can dismiss it as a delusion if you want, but this is what real religion feels like. You know, and I'll take this. I'll take it over the meaninglessness and the despair any day. And I had a few pretty interesting ideas too, which is probably the number one most practical result of doing this kind of work are the creative ideas that pop into your head. And I guess I'll talk about those in a different video. But it was a small victory, but a real one. You know, it really was. And so that's why I feel sort of empowered to come back and talk about this. And hopefully I'll be making some more videos to try to explain more about all the things that I need to get across about the work, about these ideas and concepts that have been coming up for me the last couple years, and I'm really hoping will prove useful to other people and inspiring them. You know, I went away because, well, frankly, I was humiliated. I had done so much and I had made these really bold claims. You know, I have this book that I've been trying to write for a little while about the relationship between physical fitness and psychedelic shamanism and self-actualization. And I just couldn't see how I could write this book if I could no longer do the things that I claimed to do. If I couldn't get back into these states anymore, like how could I possibly recommend to anybody else that they attempt the same things, you know? But I no longer really feel like that. I think I can recommend this in good conscience. I'm not sure when the next time I will go full bore like I have in the past will be. Now that it's getting cold, I don't have a space to work. You know, working in under austere conditions, like in near freezing temperatures, dampness and stuff, is really not conducive to good experiences, especially on high doses. And having been through what I've been through and having come fairly close to self-destructing, I'm not inclined to make this any harder on myself than it has to be. So there's a good chance that I'm not going to do like a real ceremony all the way through this winter, not until like next spring, which is fine. I've got so much to still kind of digest. I've seen so much, you know, and perhaps most importantly at this point, I really feel like I've got other work to do that will ultimately sort of be cross-training and benefit my psychedelic shamanism work, specifically about learning how to meditate and learning how to sort of, you know, you hear the phrase, "Oh, open your third eye," and I have a practical understanding of what that means now, having done it under the influence of the medicine. Now I understand that it's possible to do the same thing in a sober state. It just takes a lot of work. But knowing where I'm going, having a model for what I'm going to be trying to achieve is going to make it a lot easier, I think. And so that's what I'm basically going to train the winter doing. I'm going to try to meditate a couple hours a day and try to get a breakthrough happening. And keep working on my singing too, because that was the other thing. I quit singing or training my voice, like just out of despair. I couldn't see the point. You know, I'm not a natural singer, and it's a little bit humiliating to be a 50-year-old man who's singing rock music. It seems like such an immature pursuit, except that I remain committed to the idea now, maybe more so than ever, that like singing can be a control system for the psychedelic experience. And in particular, singing rock music, because it has such a incredibly broad, it's so versatile. It's able to communicate so many different emotional states. That it remains for me the cornerstone of this religion of the science fictional future that I have in my head. And so I'm going to keep working on it. And I'm going to try to detail what it is that I can imagine happening. Again, I'm not the person who's going to be able to take this all the way, but I'm hoping that by making videos and putting them on YouTube, where they'll effectively live forever, that somebody else will eventually come across it and be able to take these ideas and run with them. That's the plan. Thanks a lot for listening, and I'll see you soon. I'm an alligator. I'm a mama, papa coming for you. I'm the space.